Good morning, Cattle Market News. Shaylee Stewart here with your Cattle Market News tip sheet, brought to you in part by DTN. Here to do what we always do and get you caught up in the cattle market. Since the last time we chatted, I'm sorry, I've been busy working on our Big Country Genetics bull sale catalog. We have a lot to talk about. Whether you want to just start out at the top of the report with Russia invading Ukraine, what that's going to mean for our live cattle market and its rally this spring, what it's done to our feeder cattle market, or the specifics of imports, exports, box beef trends, weekly slaughter data, last Friday's cattle on feed report. We have a lot to talk about. So let's just hit this report head on with the big daddy of them all. Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, we know that Russia invaded Ukraine last week, and since then, it's just escalated every single moment since then. And so now, not only is this a problem for Ukraine and its people, and obviously Russia, infiltrating their country, but now it's gotten bigger as Putin is saying that, there's the potential that this could go nuclear. So this goes far beyond just Ukraine. But regardless of what it does, I hope that each and every single one of you are looking at the situation in which those Ukrainian people are enduring right now. The elderly men and women who don't know if they can flee because they're not well in their physical makeup, or the young children that are sleeping in subways and bomb shelters that are newborn babies. I have a 7-month-old baby, and I cannot imagine taking him to a bomb shelter and trying to get him to sleep through the night. And the sheer stress and the agony and the turmoil that each and every single one of those Ukrainian people are going through. I hope to God that you are praying for them every single day, because we can't even imagine the turmoil. No matter what videos you look at, no matter what pictures you look at, we are not living that. So we better be praying for them, because those folks have gone through utter hell here on earth, and they do not deserve it. They do not deserve to be bullied by Putin and the ramifications in which that means for their daily lives, their legacies. But I just want to encourage you to pray. Please pray for those people. And you know what? I know that this creates distress in our own hearts and our own minds and our own households, because we don't know how we would react to something like that. You don't know until you actually sit and stand in their shoes. But regardless of whether you're in Ukraine and dealing with that situation right now, or you're here in the United States feeling kind of, just hopeless given that our world is what it is, I want to encourage you. And I want to encourage you because let's just look at the verses that the Bible withholds, and let's look at Esther 4:14, and it says, "Perhaps you were born for such a time like this." So if you're feeling down in the dumps today and you don't like where our world is, I hope that you remember that God created you for a time such as this. So if you're in Ukraine, know that God is with you. Know that we're praying for you. If you're here in the U.S., pray for those people, and remember that you can do something, whether that be prayer or whether you donate or what have you. But just remember that we need to be a united front for those people. So nevertheless, let's get you caught up. This situation with Ukraine and Russia has obviously affected our markets. The cattle markets have absolutely plummeted since the invasion of Russia and Ukraine. The grain markets have gone absolutely bonkers. The corn prices are up to $7 a bushel. Soybean market has rallied substantially. It's hard to even fathom what's all going on right now, and the market is reacting emotionally. That's what's going on right now, and it's interesting to see the corn market rally. Obviously, Ukraine is a big producer of grains and commodities, but the cattle market, it's surprising. And I know that regardless if you've been in this business for a long period of time or not, you understand that the cattle market, if it's going to react negatively to something. So if something happens in the world, the cattle market gets scared, what's it do? It trades lower. And so that's what happened last week. Last week, your February live cattle contracts throughout the entire week lost $3.97. April live cattle fell $3.95. March feeder cattle fell $5.40. And April feeder cattle fell $6.10. So it's substantially affecting your futures complexes. Let's talk about that cash cattle market. Most of your trade last week developed on Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday is when Russia invaded the Ukraine. In the Southern Plains, your live cattle sold for $1.38 to $1.42. That's mostly $2 higher. And in the Northern Plains, dressed cattle sold for $2.24 to $2.29, mostly at $2.26 though, and that is considered $2 higher. But But most of the cattle in the north are set for delivery of March 7th, so they sold with time. Last week's volume of cash cattle came out to exactly 68,349,000 head, with 66% of the cattle traded being committed for the nearby delivery and 34% of the cattle being committed for the deferred delivery. So that is problematic, because why do we love the spring so much in the live cattle market? We love the spring because there is an opportunity for the cash cattle market to make its spring high before we go into the dog days of summer. Throughout the summer, there's a plethora of fat cattle available. Packers don't have to compete to get the cattle that they need, and so fat cattle prices wane through the summer every single year. It's just seasonally what happens, historically what happens, and so the spring is so important to the cash cattle market because we need to make that high, we need to make that peak before we transcend into a valley, before the market staircases its way lower into the summer days. And so this is so problematic, and it's so frustrating, the timing in which this comes with Russia, simply because this could affect our spring rally. And so as packers, they're smart individuals, they work together. And so what have they been doing? The way that they've been monitoring, engaging, and limiting their need in the cash cattle market is they've been buying cattle with time. So they'll buy cattle last week and commit 34% of them to the deferred delivery. So that means in the next 15 to 30 days, they've already got cattle bought. So they don't need to support the cash cattle market during those times. And so that's really frustrating, because in the next 15 to 30 days is especially when we're going to expect this market to rally, because supplies of market ready cattle are going to be even more thin than what they are right now. And so we would expect prices to get stronger, to grow higher. But since they have cattle committed, they kind of pad themselves, they protect themselves from having to support that market because they've already got cattle bought. So that's frustrating. So in the weeks ahead, as you're either marketing fat cattle or you're trying to watch these prices and decipher what they're doing, the success and the ability of the live cattle market's aspirations to rally will really depend on how many cattle packers get committed for that deferred delivery, because they can short the spot cash cattle market with their deferred delivery. So pay attention to that. I know that last week on Friday there was a cattle on feed report shared, and honestly it was just blown out of the waters with everything that's going on with Russia and Ukraine. So I'm going to give you the information, but it didn't affect the market whatsoever, just given the fact that everything's going on with Russia and Ukraine right now. So on feed numbers came in at 101% at 12.2 million head. Placements came in at 99% at 2 million head, and this is the first time that they've been lower than that of a year ago. Since October, our placements have just been astronomically higher than years past because we're in a drought. We don't have anywhere else to go with these cattle. They don't have grass to graze. People are having a hard time buying hay in order to feed the calves that they wanted to, just simply because it's too expensive. And marketing's totaled 97% of that of a year ago at 1.77 million head, and that's simply because, remember, in January with the Omicron virus, we had a leg in production. So nevertheless, let's get into the specifics of last week. Last week's estimated slaughter was at 647,000 head. That was down 13,000 head from the previous week and down 18,000 head from a year ago. Remember, on Monday was a holiday, so that makes sense. Box beef prices. Choice cuts averaged $260.82, down $9.06 from the previous week. Select cuts averaged $258.88, down $7.15 from the previous week, with a total movement of 686 loads. So we're expecting that box beef prices are probably going to bottom here any day now, realistically. And at that point, thankfully, packers will be seeing a little bit higher price points for their box beef prices, which will hopefully push them to chase the cash cattle market just a little bit more. Carcass weights. This is a big deal, you guys. For the week ending February 12th, 2022, carcass weights average for steers at 918 pounds. That was down 12 pounds from the previous week, and that is equivalent, to being 1 pound lighter than the same week a year ago. Heifers averaged 848 pounds, down 6 pounds from the previous week and down 2 pounds from a year ago. And you're like, well, why did we see such a drop in carcass weights? And that was because of that big storm that we had in January. Carcass weights dwindled lower after a big storm. Carcass weights always see a reduction after a big storm. So a big storm is actually good for the cattle market in some ways. Let's talk about your fresh beef imports. Remember, this is fresh beef, not frozen beef. Last week, your fresh beef imports totaled 25,803 metric tons, with Mexico, Canada, and Brazil being your biggest importers. For exports, last week's exports totaled 14,500 metric tons, with Japan, South Korea, and China being your largest buyers. And now in regards to that feeder cattle market, I know so many of you are nervous about what this feeder cattle market's going to do, just simply because grains are getting astronomically higher than what they were weeks ago, and at that point in time they were already substantially higher, significantly higher than what they were years past. And I understand, just know that this is really being pushed higher because of the complexities and the dynamics of what's going on in the Ukraine. And it's because Ukraine is such a big grain supplier, we don't know what's going to happen over there, so we don't know what the world supply of grains is going to look like given everything that's going on with Russia and the bombings and the destruction over there. So that's why your grain prices are shooting higher. Last week, feeders were sought with mixed to lower aggression and attention. Calves were bought with extreme interest, though. The calf prices continue to soar higher. In Montana last week, these are your steer prices for the entire state. I'm not giving you one sale barn specific price. I'm giving you the entire state's weighted average. So last week in Montana, your 420 weight steer sold for $2.28. Your 570 weight sold for $2.09, and your 675 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.78. In Wyoming last week, your 420 weight sold for $2.32. Your 570 weight sold for $2.20, and your 673 pound steer calf sold for $1.81. In South Dakota last week, your 434 pound steer calf sold for $2.33. Your 572 pound steer calf sold for $2.10, and your 677 pound steer calf, they sold for $1.85. In Nebraska last week, your 4 1/4 weight sold for $2.29. Your 571 pound steer calves, they sold for $2.23, and your 7 1/4 weights, they sold for $1.75. In Oklahoma last week, steer calves weighing 423 pounds sold for $2.21. Your 620 pound steer calf sold for $1.93, and your 727 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.61. In Missouri last week, your 423 pound steer calves, they sold for $2.18. Your 5 1/4 weight sold for $2.07, and your 672 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.74. And last but certainly not least, in Tennessee, your 422 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.93. Your 575 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.87, and your 671 pound steer calves, they sold for $1.47. So one thing I want to remind you is that in order to make this business work, you have to play offensively, because if you get caught playing defense, you are constantly late and you're always going to be behind. So as we look at the fat cattle market and as we look at feedlots aspiring for a cash cattle rally, we can't wait to see what's going to happen with Ukraine. We can't wait to see what the market's going to fully do in regards to the futures market, the cash cattle trade, or what's going to happen over with Russia and Ukraine. Cattlemen, I ask you that remember that your cattle are assets, and that even though the futures market has turned topsy-turvy and that everything has changed, with outside of our borders, your cattle are still assets, and you still have to go out and actively seek the prices in which you need. So do not take a defensive role in this marketplace and just take whatever packers want to give. Don't just take whatever happens to be available at the marketplace. Actively seek the prices in which you need, because you're not going to get them unless you go after them. So nevertheless, folks, Shaylee Stewart here with your Cattle Market News Tip Sheet, brought to you in part by DTN.